Good evening, everybody. Thanks for coming tonight. My name's Jim Andrews, and Middlebury Community Television over here is filming this. And if somebody couldn't be here, there's a couple of people who wanted to be here but couldn't be here. But Drew can tell them where to find it online afterwards and get that set up for them. Drew, what is it? You just find Middlebury Community Television online? And
Go to Google, type in Middlebury Community TV, and right there.
okay, all right,
And on Comcast on 1071, 1091.
okay,
If you have Comcast.
if you have Comcast. A couple of things just to get started. Bathrooms are downstairs, so you go down the stairs and then you end up in this corner in the cellar for the bathroom. And the library was having a quilt raffle, and they wanted to sell a lot more tickets. So what they've done is we've got the quilt right here, and the tickets are up here. And there's also these jars. There's a jar out there in what I understand is called the narthex. Pretty good, huh? And here, and this is for the use of the building. So if you want to make any donations just to cover cleaning of the building or any of that, there's two of those deposit jars, ticket jars. And then we have some pictures up here. We got some pictures up. Jerry Shedd brought some photos, and another woman brought some photos, and so they're up here, and you feel free to take a look at those. I have a list of topics here that I thought of that I can ask about, but we're in no way limited to this list. We're only limited by your memory of events in your lifetime or something maybe that your dad or mom or uncle experienced and you want to share with us. I think we got plenty to talk about. There's got a list of about 40 things here. So, and I'm hoping you're the ones that are going to talk about it, not me. So, first of all, I want to thank the people with the church, Scott Robinson and everybody else with the church who are letting us use the building. And you've met Drew, and you should probably meet some of the people from the Conservation Commission who are bringing this to you. Heidi, anybody else? You want to just stand up if you're from the... Just stand up. John, Conservation Commission members. And Conservation Commission, Preston's back there. Conservation Commission works primarily on natural history and conservation and education, but it does also have a responsibility for kind of historical preservation and cultural preservation as well. Let's see. And then Alyssa's not here, but I guess John is the official library representative, okay? And the library is providing the sound system. And then we have these two young women over here that will be running around with microphones. And we're going to want you to have those microphones pretty much right on your lips when you're talking so that we can get a good recording of them and everybody can hear you. So let me mention one thing that's coming up on August 9th is the next presentation that the Conservation Commission is organizing, and that's on the Pitch Pine Trail. And that's Greg Pask, who will put out black lights and sheets and stuff and see what kind of insects, moths, etc. he can attract. Maybe a few mosquitoes too, along the way. Only if we're lucky, we'll get some good ones. So let's start. Do you want to start with Glenn? Do you want to just start right off with Glenn? Glenn Andres. We will.
I think this is a wonderful thing that you're organizing, and Barbara and I are just sorry that we can't be there in person. But thank you for arranging this. Can you hear me all right?
Yes.
You can. Okay, great. One of the topics that, well, first off, let me say that we are flatlanders. So the things that I'm going to mention are all things that are, we've heard from hearsay rather than living through them. But a major topic that I think is much ignored in Addison County and by the Sheldon Museum and everyone is what happened with the hurricane of 1950. And it really did affect Salisbury badly. It was a case of a hurricane that came up the Hudson River and met a front coming down from Montreal and mixed it up over Addison County so that we had 125-mile-hour winds. And among other things, it blew the steeple off the West Side Church and dumped it in a field across the way. It took the steeple off of the village church and rammed it down through the roof so that people say the tip of it actually hit the floor. And if you look up, you'll see that there's kind of a tile ceiling up there. That's to cover up the fact that the plaster got wrecked. And actually at that time, the famous cellist Elsa Hilger, who had a camp on Lake Dunmore and loved to come up here and fish, put on a benefit concert. She organized a benefit concert to put the steeple back up on the village church. There were places that lost their roofs. Our son Kip's house, for instance, the roof was blown off of it, and people say that there were piano rolls scattered across Maple Street as a result. And Reg Paterni told us at a fireman's breakfast of a hair-raising tale of when he was a kid. They lived in a farmhouse on the west side, and the kids slept upstairs in the house, and during the hurricane, the roof got blown off the house. But the family, to protect themselves, went out into their car and drove it into the middle of a field, so it would be away from trees and other things. And the winds were blowing so strongly that they'd have to keep starting up the car and moving it back into the field because it was getting nudged right off of the field. Then back at the time of the, what is it, the 175th anniversary, when we had historical things happening in the village. We had a little parade down Maple Street and all of that. Well, in preparation for that, there were a group, Barbara was involved in it, who went around and tried to record stories from old-timers in town. And Barbara interviewed Ann Halnan, who had been our postmistress, and Ann told about they lived in the house at the corner of 53 and 7, and they had just decorated the nursery in the house. Their son Jim at the time was an infant. Anne picked up the infant and they hid in an interior closet. And when they came out, the flying glass from the hurricane had stripped the wallpaper right off the walls of the nursery. And their barn collapsed, which destroyed their equipment and some of their livestock, and essentially sent them out of farming, which is something that happened to a number of farmers around Addison County because their losses were so great. The storm hit in November, and the tales are that there wasn't enough window glass available to close up houses again. So people went right into the winter with just plywood over their windows and doors. And anyhow, it's something that it seems important to try to record now, because the people who've lived through it are getting fewer and fewer and farther between. And so I think it's a topic that, a rich topic that Salisbury should be aware of.
Thanks, Glenn.
That's great. Thanks, Glenn.
Okay, I'm going to remute.
Okay,
We're going to listen with great interest.
good.
Peter, did you want to add something? You had some memories of that hurricane?
There's a hurricane that,
Coming at you.
there was a hurricane that came in through.
Right on your lips.
Turn it right up to your mouth.
Okay, there was a hurricane that summer.
Right to your mouth.
A storm came through. There were two in 1950, and I remember that one because the winds were so great that my dad had a small sail, 17-footer, on the mooring, and it was bouncing so bad that we were afraid it could be blown to shore. And so I swam out and filled the boat with water, so the gunwales were equal, and so it equaled the waves, and it survived the storm. But I can remember every time I took my arm out to swim, it was like bee stings, the rain coming down, and we solved it. The November storm, I can remember, I wasn't here, but I remember coming up and seeing the damage done in Lake Dunmore Hotel, which had these beautiful pine trees, or Norway spruces, and that were taken down. And if I recall correctly, it was a time when Goodrow salvaged a tremendous amount of timber, and that was blown down in that storm. And it had the softwoods that were blown down were turned into logs at Goodrow's mill in East Millbury.
The hotel, was that where North 40 was, or was that where Camp Dunmore was?
The history of hotels, like Dunmore Hotel was known as the Mountain Spring Hotel originally, and that's where the North 40 is, where the exit of the lake is, where the fish weir was. There was another hotel where Camp Dunmore is on the other side. That was gone by the time I came in '38. It's 4 months old, and I spent every summer of my life at the lake. And that hotel disappeared somewhere, I think in the 20s. But Lake Dunmore Hotel was built around 1890 and built on a foundation of flat stones. And those stones started to settle, and the hotel started to settle. And so eventually the upper stories were torn down and turned into the North 40. But prior to that, it was a 4-story hotel, and with the cottages across the way. As a matter of fact, if you come around the lake from the East Millbury way, the first cottage on the right-hand side, as you go past the stream, it's really close to the road. That room at the end of it was my room as a kid.
Was there also a fire at North 40?
Yeah, eventually I think somebody was killed in that fire.
No,
I think there's a death in that fire. That was after some period of time. It was turned to North 40, keeping the first floor in the ballroom of the hotel and the dining room of the hotel. But I think the first floor, but the upper floors were taken down.
Anybody have some memories of, well, go ahead.
Andy.
Right over here.
This is the hotel that burned down in 1904, where Camp Dunmore is.
He's coming with the mic for you.
Speak right into this.
Right on your lips.
Yeah.
This is the hotel where Camp Dunmore is now, or was.
Or is that across?
Okay.
Passed around, and this picture is the day after the fire. It's still smoldering.
Wow.
Kathy, can you grab those and we'll put them up here and people can look at them afterwards? Or we can pass them around. Let me just pass them around.
Oh.
Yeah. Somebody? So any other memories of hurricanes? Just while we're kind of on the old hurricane topic. Okay, how about the old hotel stuff? North 40 or Lake Dunmore Hotel? Okay, let me move. Yeah,
I can talk for hours and hours about Lake Dunmore Hotel.
we'll give you 10 minutes.
My dad was a high school teacher in New York City, and he spent his summers as assistant manager of Lake Dunmore Hotel. And Lake Dunmore Hotel was owned by Walter Bean, and Howard Hart owned the Brandon Inn and the Prospect House at Bombazine. And Walter Bean, my dad sort of ran it together, and it had an interesting history. It was a restricted hotel in the 30s. It did not allow Jewish people to join, as many hotels in the area did at that time. And my dad, along with Walter, changed that over to a point where it had about 90% Jewish clientele, as I was raised there. And I I started working in the kitchen when I was 12. You know, today my parents will all be in jail for allowing child labor, but I loved it. I worked washing dishes, doing slopping with dishes, and lining them up. And at 14, I went to the dining room as a relish boy, and serving relishes and jellies in the morning and pickles. And we have around 150 house count at the height of the season. And I would serve 21 meals per some capacity, and I would average about $1 a week tip. So I was making $150, which was the only person who was better paid in the hotel was the chef. I made twice as much as my dad did as a master. And so I continued in that job until I was in law school. And then in 1958, I graduated from the dining room Lake Dunmore Hotel to bartending at the Middlebury Inn and working as a law clerk then.
Did that pay any better?
No.
How about businesses, other businesses on the lake that people might want to mention? I mean, I just remember barely coming into town to come to the general store here in the middle of the village. Does anybody remember doing that or have any stories about that kind of other business? You want to talk?
Noise store,
It was Noise's store?
Noise.
Noise?
And we used to go there to buy these little candy dots on strips of paper.
Microphone's coming. Right on your lips.
Which building was it?
McKeever?
It later became Blue Willow Antiques, and now I think it's a private residence. But we used to go there to buy candy dots on strips of paper
Right.
and get cavities, which is why I became a dentist.
There was also another store in the village.
Okay.
At the time, the only store was down the Willow shop is, but on the,
Right behind you.
there was another store, Gladys branch, I'm trying to remember her last name, would be on the south side of the Maple Street coming up here. And my favorite story about that was about Harry Sullivan. I don't know if any of you remember Harry Sullivan, but Harry was, the reputation was, he knew more dead drunk than the rest of the men in Salisbury did cold sober. And he went in one day while I was there, and he came into Gladys branch. He had a friend, Wally Phelps, who used to drink together. And he came in, I can remember him saying to Gladys, I'd like, he had sort of an affected accent, so not quite British, I'd like a gallon of wine. And she looked at, which would you like, red or white? He said, red, that's Wally's favorite. And so we had two stores in town, but Noise was the better, the supermarket of Salisbury at the time.
And that was over this way. That, the one you're talking about,
Yeah,
that was the supermarket.
That's branch, yeah.
And I also remember a number of marinas that came and went along the lake, that we had marinas where you could just, drive your boat up and get service. Let's see, there was one over
Keller's Marina,
Keller's.
over by Key Wade.
Okay,
Yeah.
it was Howard, right? Was that Howard Keller? Right on it.
This isn't. I'm trying to use the mic. Is it working?
Did it get turned off then?
Is it- Okay.
Right.
Yeah, Keller's Marina, I think it was.
Yeah.
I spent a summer there pumping gas when I was probably 16. The biggest challenge for me was making change. But I also had a memory about the hotel. I remember that during the 50s, they would show movies in the backyard. They would put up a big screen on the lakeside of the hotel, and all the kids would come and sit on the grass and watch movies. I remember seeing Black Beauty there back in the day. And also later, after the Pinky's dance hall burned down, they had square dances there at the hotel for a while, before it became the North 40 and before that one burned down.
Are you old enough, old fella, to remember dancing at Pinky's?
I do remember dancing at Pinky's, yes.
And was that square dancing or?
It was square dancing, and we would go like on Wednesday nights for the kids. It was probably when I was like 8 or 9. I remember there was a huge veranda around the outside of the building. And there, at one end of it was a bar. For us, we could get grape soda and orange pop. But I think when the older folks were there, it was a working bar. I don't know, probably none of us are old enough to remember that. But I wouldn't be surprised if they had pretty wild times there back in the day.
Somebody's waving.
Does anyone else remember dancing at Pinky's?
Not only dancing, Cold Point, but the bar was in the parking lot.
The bar,
That's what I'm talking
the
about.
bar was the parking lot. Sue's got somebody.
I remember too, dancing.
You remember dancing there?
Dancing, square dancing. Jim, names of people who are speaking.
Okay.
Oh, do you want to hear Jim?
That's right here.
Yeah,
Could you give us your name first? We got a request for people's names.
yeah, I'm Richard Hopkins, and I want to
Okay.
share a very warm memory. In about the summer of 1957,
Yep.
when I was 10, my sister and I, we were at our camp on the west shore of Lake Dunmore. And my sister and I got in the rowboat with parental permission. We had a light. We rowed across the lake to the Cove Point dance venue and spent an hour or two there dancing with, I was 10, my sister must have been 16. And then when it was over, we rowed back across the lake, back to our place. I can't remember for sure whether there was live music or whether it was recorded music. What I do remember is that there were enough kids there that we had a square of our own. And we just laughed and laughed and laughed with how much fun we were having. It was just perhaps related to why I later became a caller of square dances and contra dances. Because I could still pull up how much pleasure we got out of those dances.
Thanks. In the back?
Yeah, my name is Carolyn LaRose. I'm a Waterhouse.
Oh, Waterhouse. We're
I want to
famous.
talk about Waterhouse first. I want to continue with the dance part of things.
Yeah.
I used to go to Sabre and Sleepy Oaks, which
Yeah.
at one time was a roller skating rink and then became a dance hall. And my memory of dancing one night was, as a teenager, I was keeping an eye on the boys at Waterhouses. And there was one special boy that used to, he and his family rented a cottage in North Cove. And he asked me to the dance one night, and I was beyond ecstatic. So we snuck off to the dance, and my mom and dad never questioned where we were. They always knew we were at Waterhouses and we'd be home on time, et cetera, et cetera. This particular night, I missed curfew, and my father came out looking for me. And he found me at Sleepy Oaks just as I was dancing a wonderful slow dance with the guy. He comes walking into Sabrin's and he says, "Carolyn, you are late for your curfew. You need to come home right now." And I became about this tall. So I never did go back to Sabrin's to have a dance. So Waterhouse was established in the 1800s by my grandfather, 4 generations removed, Loyal Waterhouse. Loyal established it as Waterhouse picnic grounds. He then began to build rowboats. We still have one in the family. And it just was a place that we hung out my whole life. It was passed down to my great aunt, who actually lived right next door here. After getting married at the age of 65, she moved into this house. But until then, she lived in the main house at Waterhouses, which is directly across the street from Waterhouses. And she was the town clerk. She was the summer post office. And she ran Waterhouses all by herself. Many of us in my family worked for Aunt Margaret over the course of the years. But it just was the place to be. The music was always playing on the jukebox, and you got to meet a lot of really nice, cool guys that came just for the summer. But Waterhouse has always held a really special place in our heart. A lot of people think Waterhouse just means it's a house on the water. And we begged them to put the apostrophe on their sign, but we don't succeed with getting that accomplished so that people will realize that there's more to it than just a building on the water. But anyway, that's my story. My family lived many generations in Salisbury, and Salisbury's always home.
Was your house the one that later became the Reynolds house? Was, you know,
Yes, that was the
decades later.
original Waterhouse. That's where
Yeah.
my grandmother and her two siblings, with my great-great-grandfather, were raised. Yes,
Yeah.
that was Loyal's original family house.
And-
It got passed down through generations. Seeley, when he bought Waterhouses,
Yeah.
he moved his family in there, did a major renovation in the house so that he could get all of his children in there.
And the cabins that were where the fishing access
Yes,
is,
that belonged
were they
to-
yours or were
They were May Hoffman.
different?
And
Okay.
May, when she sold that, built a house kind of across from the minister, what used to be the minister's house. I'm not sure it is anymore. But May was a very, very, very tall woman. And as a result, the house that she had built had to be built to accommodate her. All the kitchen shelves were higher. The toilet was built up higher. Everything in that house was built to accommodate May. And when it got sold not too many years ago, it's been in the process of being renovated so that normal people can live in it.
Thank you for that. Well,
I got to tell one thing about the rowboats he made. They were round bottom rowboats.
Yes.
They were the best damn rowboats I've ever seen.
Yeah, we
And
still
he had-
have one.
He had a couple dozen of them up there, and he rented them.
Yes.
And May was a town clerk, and she used to sit there by the table while selling candy, taking the post, and writing word for word in green ink into the town records the deeds that came.
Yes.
And there was, before there was any printers, what have you, I can remember sitting there watching her, and as I became a lawyer in title searches, I recalled back her handwriting coming out through the thing. She was a remarkable person.
There was a vault in that original family house. There was a vault in that original family house, and that's where all those record books were kept for the town, was in that vault. And I think when Seeley bought it, the vault got moved out.
May Hoffman's husband was the legislator, didn't she?
I'm sorry?
I think May Hoffman's husband was the representative from Salisbury in the state legislature.
You know, I don't know much about May other than her stature and the fact that she owned those cabins.
Jerry, you wanted to say something?
Hi, Jerry Shedd from Ripton. Waterhouses is.
You need to add more, that you're not from Ripton, you're also from.
Okay, so I was born in Rutland, but I spent 50 years in New York State, so I'm a woodchuck and a flatlander. My grandfather, Francis West, grew up in Salisbury, and when he was a teenager, he worked at Waterhouses. My mother thinks that he probably took care of the horses. At that time, they had a stable there, which is kind of strange because I've heard stories that he hated horses. But anyway, he worked at Waterhouses. And my grandmother was from Rutland. Her family came up to vacation here at Waterhouses, and that's how my grandparents met. They were married at the main house at Waterhouses in 1916. And could come back to that in a moment because I have a question about that maybe somebody has the answer to. Anyway, Francis West went on to have several businesses in town. all of which were failures eventually. He operated a mill where my mother was born, just down the road here, where the bridge that was replaced a few years ago, it was torn down in 1930, but he operated that mill, renting it. He also operated the sawmill across the street, which is gone now. And had a trucking company. There are pictures up here of his trucks. His motto was on the door, FG West Trucking, a good haul for all. So, but my question is, I've heard, and I can't remember the source of this, but the question is that Waterhouses, I'm told, had a bus. They bought a bus at one point to bring in customers from Middlebury and from Brandon to be guests there, and that my grandfather, Francis West, was the driver. I haven't been able to corroborate that. I would love to see a photograph of that. Now, he might have been 13 at the time, but he could drive anything. So it's really quite possible that was it. So if anybody knows anything about a Waterhouse bus, this would have been in the 19-teens, I think. I would love to know that. Thanks.
Anybody know anything about that bus? I don't think
But I might be able to find out some info.
Yeah.
Okay.
Back to Jerry. Yeah. Donnie, you had one of those boats at one point. One of the Waterhouse's rowboats. Didn't you sink one out in front, or didn't your father sink one out in the bay to preserve it?
We do have one out in the bay.
And do you also have one that
We also have the probably second surviving one. And we also have my mom's Waterhouse's boat, which is a mold off that boat, and it's plastic.
So
it's still rope.
Second surviving one, so you have a wooden one as well?
Yes.
Where did you stash that?
Not telling.
Connie, is there anything else you want to contribute that memories of the lake?
Okay.
Kathy's ready.
You guys can do Kathy, Dick, I think the Hendels were sitting
Right on that, Kathy.
The Hendel family was sitting in this row with me, actually had a whole bunch of those boats, and one of them was the mold for Mom's boat.
That's
Right.
correct.
We snagged it.
The existing wooden one was given to my dad by the Hendels, from which we made a plastic one.
Thank you.
Yeah.
So as long as I'm here, the Hendel family owns the island. They didn't always own the island, I'm told, and I might have one of the grandsons tell that story, how the Hendel family came to own the island.
Well, the story is that sometime in the late 20s or early 30s, my grandfather walked out to the island, laid claim to it. He walked from our property all the way out low water and claimed it. That's how
it became yours. What are you doing tomorrow? I got a flag.
We had two of the Waterhouse boats. So.
Do you still have some?
No.
No.
He's got them.
It's some unknown place. All right, we can move to.
I just finished the Waterhouse boat story. So one of the reasons that we had it was because Margaret, who was the only other person that lived on the lake when we grew up year-round, tried to give the moles, the structure that those boats were built on to my dad. And he refused, he didn't have a place to put them at the time. And I was told by him that they ended up in the Maritime Museum at Button Bay.
Good.
And I think they still reside there someplace in the archives.
The moles?
The moles, I forget what you call them, but the strong back and the frame that the boats were actually, the wood was actually molded to. And so one could be reproduced in its original form from that. I've always thought about doing it, but I'm getting too old to do it.
Other topics then?
One,
Gary?
you talk about horses. You know, when I was a kid, Lake Dunmore Hotel had its stable, the stable that was there, and kept horses there for private riding, but for the camps. And Camp Dunmore for girls and boys, Key Wading. And I earned free rides by walking kids' camp leads. And, but one of the joys of it was every once in a while the horses need shoeing. And we come down to the village, and Jim Peterson was the blacksmith. And you know, the blacksmith shop is still there. Right across, he's the postmaster. And all I can remember is the image of Jim stripped to the top with a leather apron, the forge going and shoeing the horses. But I had a very special pleasure with him when we had the anniversary celebration here in the parade. I had my team of Percherons pulling a wagon, and Jim sitting next to me. And we're going down the street, and his family was there. Jim was in his 90s then, which seems young to me today. And and as we came down with his family, I handed him the reins to him and said, "Jim, you take over." And so he had, coming down Main Street here with 2 Percherons weighing a ton each in his hands, and you wanted to see somebody smiling happy. And that night they said he did a jig. And so he was the memory of a real blacksmith shop. In all the images of Jim Peterson was there. He also, I think, at the age of 90, went back to Brandon High School and got his high school diploma.
Is this the blacksmith shop that Kip
Yes.
now owns? Yeah.
The red building.
And he's been trying to fix it up slowly over the years. Yeah. Let me jump way ahead just to see if anybody remembers this like I do. And so this wouldn't have been ancient history, but the Lake Dunmore monster. Anybody remember reading about somebody was picking blueberries on Sunset Hill, and this made the papers. And the Lake Dunmore monster stood up. Nobody remembers this?
Stood up in the water?
Stood up in the blueberries.
Oh, the blueberries.
Yeah. Stood up in the blueberries, and they described it in the paper. And I don't know if this was a less reputable citizen. Nobody remembers that? All right, I'll drop that. It's in the papers. It was in the Edison Independent. It's got to be true. Back in the day. All right. Somebody else? Completely different topic. Mary.
Mary McClintock. I grew up on West Salisbury Road. My mom and dad, Bill and Sally McClintock, came from New Jersey and New York, flatlanders, completely flatlanders, inherited a farm and didn't know what to do with it, so they said, we'll get some cows. So I had the most amazing childhood growing up on a farm. I was there since I was 2, and so I don't know anything else. But the thing that, so many things come to mind. But we talk about the village, and there was Mayhew's store, Gladys's store, the church, the village school, where the town offices currently are located, and that was the upper grades. And then on the other side of town, the west side of town, there was also the West Side School, which were the lower grades, the town Grange next door, which I think just stands vacant. I don't know if anything's ever been done with it. We all have our cemeteries, east-west. And then way over near the railroad tracks was Dyer's store. And Dyer's store was another kind of general store. And my mom's story that cracks me up is she said, yeah, when I was young, we just got there and your dad and I worked hard, and she said, I just thought I'd go get some beer. And so she went over to the store and she said to the guy, where can I get a handy Andy? And the guy, and I saw my mom. But anyway, he pointed her around. So they had beer, groceries, and also right next to the tracks near the store was where we brought our milk in cans to be picked up by the train. And that was just before the milk trucks started coming, a few years before. So that whole west side, east side of town is a really interesting thing. And I'll tell you, the most interesting thing as a kid is going to town meetings. And the east side, west side, absolute drag out conversations that happened. And I remember being little thinking, oh my word. And because people just didn't hold anything back. And there's a lot of controversy back there. I really remember when I was a teenager that I think I had to be like 15, and I was driving down West Salisbury Road toward Middle Road, and I saw I don't think I'm making this up, I saw to the left of me a sign I'd never seen before, and it was a swastika. And I was thinking, what is going on here? Because I was old enough to know what that was. And it was at the time that zoning was being introduced. And talk about a hot topic in Salisbury, which still is, but it was red hot at the time. So that whole east-west, the politics, the two schools, stores, and really different perspectives on our town can be made and had from talking to people who lived on the west side versus the east side. And another interesting, just my last thing, I've been in this church since I was a kid, and this is my side of the church. We always sat like in the second pew there, and not by any design, but literally people from the west side of town sat on this side, and people from the village sat over there. And I don't think it was on purpose. I think it just happened. Anyway, yeah.
Mary, how long did those old schools continue?
I'm sorry, what was
How long did the old schools continue? How long were they running?
I think the Salisbury New School was built like almost 20 years ago, 25?
20 years ago?
98?
Yeah.
96.
Okay, yeah, thank you, 98. And then they did the big school. So,
Thanks.
The east-west divide came right down into modern times. I don't know if anybody remembers, but before the pandemic, we used to have a Salisbury picnic over in Granbury State Park. And we used to have a rope pull. And the east side was one side of the rope pull, and the west side was the other side of the rope pull, and it was so much fun. I was friends of a sort with Martha Sullivan, and Martha used to tell me a lot of stories about the east side and the west side.
And that's Becky Holmes talking.
That's right, I'm Rebecca Holmes.
As an East Sider, I can tell you, we didn't like the West Side people.
Better rein this in, Jim.
And it was an East Sider that burned the bridge down? Is that what happened? Don't go there. Let's see. So, let's move to, let's see. Route 7. Yeah, when Route 7 was built and it was moved out of the center of town, I can remember the last piece of that, which I think was the piece that replaced Holman Road. And I remember driving out and looking to where they had cut through the swamp on that side of town. But anybody have memories of building Route 7 and moving it out of town?
What year was that?
Mary does.
I know, I getting old.
Yeah, Route 7, when I was a kid, I remember remember it stopped at it went on Holman and came out, and then it went up Maple, came through the village around by the Gorilla, and then went on.
Can you get closer to the mic, Mary?
Sorry. Is this good?
Turn it off.
Did it turn off?
I didn't do anything.
People grab it, just push that button.
Is it dead?
Nope.
No, but when people
It's
grab
easy
it.
to turn it off. Just,
Okay.
just grab it. Yeah.
So, do you want me to start over?
Yes.
So Route 7 started at Holman, went the whole length of Holman, came sort of where it is now, and then up Maple Street, through the village, and then over to the Gorilla that wasn't there, of course, and then continued on. The reason I remember it changed so much is that my parents hated that field. Like we were over on West Salisbury Road, and we came over the hill down into that big meadow where it's flat. And so I just remember all of a sudden, there was no field there that we could get to anymore. And by then we were done farming. But anyway, it was a big deal.
Mary, what year was that?
Oh, I don't know. I was little. I was young. So it had to be like in the late
1960?
50s, early 60s maybe? Does that sound right?
It's 40s, I think.
Before.
Oh, well, it was done in pieces though, wasn't it? Route 7? Because I think
I know Route 7 didn't go through that field before I was little, I think.
So, yeah.
I'm Preston Turner, and I live on the west side of Eland Road, and for some reason I was looking at aerial photographs of the town, and we've been talking about Route 7 and when it got constructed. Seems like it was done in different segments, because I had a photo from 1942 that showed the section that's just west of here, past the egg farm, being worked on.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure it had to be, Mary and I are not old enough to to remember the first part. It must have been somewhere around 1960 or so, in the early 60s maybe. Peter?
I can remember a story about the construction in the 60s of the area about the wire wheel is now.
Okay.
And there was the construction company had a big bonfire on the west side of the road. The sparks came across the road and set fire to the house on the east side. And the house burned. And in those days, I was a member of the Middlebury Volunteer Fire Department. Before Salisbury had a department, but they let me stay in Middlebury. We're mutual aid, and I was in Salisbury. I was the first one on the scene. And I saw the sparks going through the air. And so it came trial for trial. And Jimmy Haw, who was one of the best defense counsel for insurance companies in the state, was representing the defendant. And I was called as a witness to show the sparks were coming. And I'm sitting there on the witness stand, and Jimmy Haw approaches, he looks at me and says, "So you think you're a fireman, do you?" And they then settled the case.
Let me just take you back to Sabre and Sleepy Oaks, because one of my classmates was Brian Sabrin. His uncle was Leo, and Leo Sabrin owned and ran Sabre and Sleepy Oaks. And Brian always said, "You got to watch him when he pays us," because we played in the band, and so we played at Sabre and Sleepy Oaks. Probably not at the party that you were at, but maybe a couple of years later. And he said, just watch Uncle Leo, because he said, one for the band, one for me, one for the pocket. One for the band, one for me, one for the pocket. Whether that's true or not, that's what my friend said happened. How about the miniature golf courses? They lasted a long time, those miniature golf courses. And where our camp was, which was in the bay behind the point that the boat access now goes through the point and it takes you into a bay, and that's where our camp was, right in there. So we used to walk out there all the time and play miniature golf at that golf course. But there were two for a period of time. Anybody want to talk miniature golf? Any good miniature golf stories?
I can tell the story about how Merrill Williams Golf Course, that was the course that was between the hotel and Waterhouses.
Yeah, okay.
He used marble dust to set the thing. And somewhere along the idea, he got the idea to build this course. And he rented the land from Margaret Waterhouse for, I think, $25 a year. And he built the course. And my kid brother, who thought he was a golfer, was the one who set the pars on the course. And he ran a little snack bar there as well. You get sodas or candy bars there. And
Oh, yeah.
And as I recall, the 17th hole was a hellish hole. It was uphill, and you could have a great score. You got that one, you'd end up with a 6 or 7 of that one. But then it was just as an aside, at that time, there were a lot of places with snack bars. There's one where the outlet is right now. There used to be a log cabin on the west side, and Captain Blood had a place there that sold candies and ice cream in the summertime. You had Farnham's, where Sunshine Lodge is. They had a deck and coffee house there. You had Waterhouses, and at night you had Merrill's miniature golf course. And Merrill Williams' father was Ralph Williams, who did a lot of construction, took care of a lot of homes during the wintertime, and he was the chief engineer for Lake Dunmore Hotel and kept that functioning physically for a long period of time. And Merrill was his son.
Do you remember what the name of the other golf course was that was closer to the fish hatchery? Well, it had some Golferama or Golfersville or.
St. Joseph's was?
Not
St. Joseph's, but Joseph's.
Not right there. It was closer to the fish hatchery.
Yeah, you leave the fish hatchery coming to the lake, it was on the south side, and
Yeah.
the whole length of it.
Yeah, and I can't even remember the name of it.
No, I don't either.
I don't know how many years it survived.
Eventually, just fell into the brush. A couple of fraternities at Middlebury College had a demo derby up on one of those fields one year.
Oh, that's right.
That really put the end to miniature golf. Made it kind of dicey, trying to go from the first hole to the second hole with a car going by.
So
So one of the things about Merrill's golf course is, first of all of the grounds were crushed marble. And Merrill would spend hours upon hours of making sure that that crushed marble was patted down just enough to make it smooth so you could have a good game of golf. And the other thing that he did was, if you couldn't afford to play golf that day, he also had croquet set up, kind of on the opposite side of the course, and you could go play croquet all day long for free. So he made it easy for all the kids to have fun at the golf course.
I understand that if you wanted to see a marionette show, that you could also do that on the weekends, or I don't know how often.
I don't know if I'm the only one. I'm Jim's brother, Joel. I don't know if I'm the only one here that remembers the marionettes, but I think it was Tony Neary's property, I think down the west side of the lake, and we would go down and watch these puppet shows that night. How many of us remember puppet shows? Cool. Oh, that's cool, because I thought maybe I made it up. Also, I wanted to know, just to see a show of hands of how many people remember playing miniature golf at that golf course.
They were Smiley.
Smileys. A lot of people.
We took our kids there.
Oh, did you? Was this the one by Waterhouse?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
So, how about winter stuff? I mean, not that many people were on the lake in winter. Brushes were, I don't know how many other people. There were Really, Donnie, you think you're about the only people that overwintered? Yeah? But there used to be, you guys used to spend some time ice boating. And that was always kind of fun to do and to watch. You got any memories of winter sports or winter events on the lake that you care to share?
Go ahead,
Does anybody remember the races that they used, how do you write this?
It's out of
The races that they used to have out on the lake with the Saabs?
With the what?
The Saab car?
With the cars.
Nice. Do you remember that?
Somebody in Salisbury had a
You're
Saab.
making this up too.
Huh.
Bonnie and Jimmy McDonald have been coming here. What about the Lumberjack Roundup?
Oh, yeah.
I do remember Jimmy Devenaugh telling me that they used to test out tires on the lake. He had to test out snow tires and stuff like that. And by test out, I think they were having a little fun.
They would have a lot of fun.
Yeah.
There used to be races, and we used to come up to watch that. But my dad was a salesman for tow motor forklifts.
Yeah.
And they were bought out by Caterpillar. 1957, I think it was. I was 6 years old. That's what brought us up here to the Lumberjack Roundup. Oh, not
right on the left.
Sorry. Right. How's that? I turned it on. Nobody wants to hear me. How's that?
Really close.
Is that working?
Now you're here.
It was the Lumberjack Roundup that brought us up here in Bradbury. And they had the grease poles and the horse poles. It was all 4-H driven.
Yep.
So, long story short, I introduced my fiance to Lake Dunmore. Needless to say, we got married and we had our honeymoon up here. And we got up here so late, the only thing open was A&W. And that's where we had our... So here we are. So the Jack Roundup, I believe it's gone to New York now, or?
It moved for a while. Had something to do with field days, didn't it? Did they do it at field days, the Lumberjack Roundup, for a little while? And then I didn't hear anything more about it. Kind of disappeared.
They had the logging event at Rutland one time. The microphone. They had the logging event at the Rutland Fairgrounds one time.
Yeah.
Remember, because we went, because
What?
Spencer was doing it.
I definitely remember the grease.
I do remember that.
The greased pole that you're talking about.
I'm sorry?
The greased pole.
The grease pole.
That you were talking about.
Yeah.
And there was a
20 kids going to the top for a $3 bill. On
Yeah. And they had
we had to split that.
Yeah, and they had bucksaw and chainsaw competitions, carving, axe throwing.
Great.
Yeah. Oh, log rolling out in the water. Yeah.
Bonnie's Canadian. Her uncle was one of those log rollers.
Yeah.
From New Brunswick, and they used to come down for it. So it was really a unique. I'm sad that they moved it wherever it is. I believe it's in upstate New York. I'm not sure.
Okay. Any other winter events? Oh, Peter?
Just quick response. I know they had log rolling because I was in wet on several occasions.
There you go.
But the one part,
So I didn't know
winter in the lake, which many people don't realize, was gathering ice for the winter, for the summer.
Okay.
Lake Dunmore Hotel had an ice house that was located between water houses and the hotel. A big building, completely hollow, except very well insulated. And in the wintertime, they would cut the ice in the lake, would be stored with sawdust. And this is before World War II. Refrigeration really came in after World War II for the most part. And prior to that, the ice boxes were stored by ice. We'd take out, I was too small, but I watched the fellows working, pull out pull out a piece of ice from the lake, hose it off, ice pick it, and it would eventually get ice picked down to the point, be in jars for the ice water, for the butter trays, and what have you. So as the summer went down, the ice box, the ice house diminished, and usually had enough ice to last a year. But thinking that this was a major activity, which is hard to conceive of today, that this was the major source of refrigeration for the hotel business and for other places, I'm sure, but the hotel had this big ice house, which I remember very vividly.
Those hotels must have been seasonal though, right? Yeah, were they just
The
summer?
hotel was open from the last weekend in June to Labor Day.
Yeah, okay.
8 to 10 week season.
Yeah. Any other winter events? Donnie?
Well,
Oh, Kathy.
he wanted me to, I dispute this, but my brother says I did learn to drive on Lake Dunmore. But we lived on the lake, and we had an old car, and my father always, it was out there, and you drug it around to the fishing shanty, or to our cove where we had bonfires and so forth. So there were also fishing shanties out there, not a lot at that time, there were a few. And I did apply the brakes at one point and apparently skidded into one of the fishing
Which I was. With the kerosene burn.
I want to prompt Kathy and Don a little bit to tell something about Doc Phillipson in particular, whose camp I bought 30 years ago, and the Phillipsons owned it for 50 years, so talking about a long time. But Doc had a fire truck out at the camp, and he was a great storyteller. So as I came on the scene, and I rented their place for 7 summers before I bought it, I used to listen to a lot of Doc's stories, and I bet you two can fill in a few. I heard about the fire truck and how everyone would pile on after dinner, and these were dinners where I think cocktail hour for the adults was considerable, and then they'd race this fire truck around Indian Trail and Kelsey Lane perhaps, and sometimes people would fall off. And you know, they slept it off on Saturday. But I'm sure you can embellish a little bit more.
That would be my brother, and of course that's mostly, he has the better memory for this.
What you're talking about is the Vim, which was a fire truck that was owned by Brandon. It was a 1917 fire truck, which Dr. Phillipson bought, or he might have stolen it, I don't know. He was the veterinarian and a little bit of a character, but he did have the fire truck at the lake for many, many years, and raced around in the woods, and there's many stories about it. The favorite one that I have is he would come roaring into our driveway and back it up to my mother's screen door in the front of the house and retard the spark and backfire the thing into the living room, and then go down the driveway, and the image I can remember is her running out the front door with a broom chasing him. It had a horn, Claxton, and him blowing the horn as they went down the driveway. So there's more stories about it, and the Vim still exists in the family. It's still running.
But Johnson.
Yeah, it's in the Northeast Kingdom, but that's what's left of Wild Bill. Does anybody remember Means? Anybody heard the name Means?
M-E-A-N-S.
I don't know how you spell it. I can't spell my own name. It was a tea room at the end of the lake where the cottages are today, and it was in the 20s, and it started basically servicing the steam mill gang that built all the houses up there. when there used to be a big lumber mill right at the end of the lake. But you're talking about places you could go. In the 20s, you could go there and it was you could row there in a boat and have dinner and tea and whatever, but it was called Meehan's Tea Room. Nobody had ever heard of it.
You reminded me of my brother's garbage truck, which was satisfaction guaranteed or double your garbage bag. They did business for one summer, I think. I don't know if you ever had to. And I also remember, Donnie, I think you put me in one of those ice boats, and I was having a good time in it, but I had to watch the end of where the river came into the lake, because that was all open water there. And that boat was really moving along, and I had to make sure that I came about in time to miss the open water and get back over to where you guys were with the rest of the ice boats. I remember that was kind of exciting to stay on the ice. Let's see, other topics that haven't, I've got some written down here. Yeah, Jimmy.
Yeah, I work for Margaret Waterhouse. I'm Jimmy again. I'm from Middleburg, Salisbury now. Oh, and I worked for Margaret Waterhouses for a couple of years, and then one year we we were getting the boats ready for the next summer. Well, I'm working there, and who do I see talking with her but the Sealy Reynolds?
Yeah.
And think about a person that really, by Margaret Waterhouse, that was all just forest. He came up with the idea of opening the thing up for camping. I mean, he really did a good job. The other thing is my grandfather, John Benjamin, and Sam Emmerle tried to buy Waterhouses from Margaret Waterhouses. She threw them out of the building, told them never return to Waterhouses. And they never returned. She's pretty firm. But if Silly Reynolds hadn't bought that, I don't know if we'd have the camping areas that we have in this lake. I mean, Silly Reynolds really did a tremendous job of developing that property.
Kathy's holding up a sailboat picture, and that kind of brings up the Lake Dunmore Association, the Junior Lake Dunmore Association, all that kind of stuff that doesn't exist right now, does it? Doesn't exist anymore?
Yeah, none of it exists.
So-
Richard, here, I'll pass this on to Don. So for about 24 years, we had a Lake Dunmore sailing club here. It started in 1950, and there's an article in Vermont Life with a full-page color picture of the Esterbrookes and their lightning, and tells about the beginning of the Lake Dunmore Sailing Club. This is a picture of a lightning, which was one of the class boats that were raced on the lake. That's John and I and Bill Powers, who many of you have heard in this building speaking about history. So we are now a piece of history, and this boat is going to be auctioned off at the Lake Dunmore Association next. So it's one of, I think, might be the last lightning that actually sails on the lake at the present time. But that went on until 1973. Don and I looked it up. He has a lot of silver in the family from races. It was a lot of people that organized this. There was a junior sailing club. We set up our own officers. We ran our own races, and they were held on Wednesday afternoons. Then most of us crewed, or once we got older, we sailed ourselves. on Saturday mornings. And well, that juniors sail twice a week, Wednesday and Saturday morning. Saturday afternoon was the senior racing, and Sunday afternoon was the handicapped racing, where all kinds of sailboats participated. There was a big party at the end of the year at Debbie Britton's Nagney waterfront house, where we all gathered, and Dr. Hendel, the owner of the island, would float for almost every race in his Old Town canoe with a slide, the old cameras that take slides, and he would take hundreds of slides almost every race, and we would sit through a lot of slides at that picnic. But it was a great experience for us. Don, you can add or no. Yes?
Why did it end?
I think my parents' generation, my generation, my husband John raced. I think it ended because now the kids have organized sports and organized special interest camps. People aren't here all summer with their kids. They're here for 2 weeks or a month or a week. This was very time consuming, and it's basically what we did for those 24 years.
I've got to tell a special story about the sailing club. It's a very personal one. I used to race a snipe for Dr. Hendel. He used to let me do that, and we raced, but we also partied after races. And one night, after partying, we decided to go to the Waverly Inn to have a drink. And we walked in and sat down at a table for the sailing club. And by sheer luck, there was a young woman sitting back to back from the French school. And in the course of the evening, I brought out my very bad high school French, but enough to get her phone number. And I asked her if I could give her a ride home. She said, no, I came with these 3 men. I'm not going to go home with you. But she gave me her phone number. And 65 years later, we celebrated our anniversary. And the funny part of it is that had there been one chair over, I would never have met her. We would never, ever, the one contact was there, and it was all thanks to the sailing club. So.
That's cute.
Do people remember getting out and looking for Sputnik to go over the lake? When Sputnik first went up, Donnie, you remember that? Just getting out. Other of it going out in the lake, maybe during some of the eclipses. And what? Oh, you guys used to sail at night. You guys used to go out on full moons. My sister used to disappear out with him. Yeah, after all hours they went out. The microphone, Donnie.
The Sputnik, which was the first satellite, a Russian satellite, I believe, I can't remember exactly what month it was, but it was in either January or February. The lake was frozen solid. There was no one else that lived around here at that time. My dad was always very interested in things like that, and he decided that we should all go look at it. So he bundles us up. He had a timetable of when this thing was coming. He bundled us up, and I remember it was right around 0. And we walked from our house out into the middle of the lake, right pretty close to the island, and watched the damn thing go over. And I think it was someplace between 11 and 1 o'clock at night. And it was 0. And we did see it. Kathy went, I went, and my parents. We were the only people watching Sputnik that night on Lake Dunmore, I can tell you that.
Jim.
Sorry, just a second. When our kids were little, well, up until even kind of now, we've rented one of Donnie's camps on the lake, and we have twin girls, and they were really little, and they were sleeping, and it was a eclipse of the moon, so we were out on the lake, and it was getting, to the eclipse part, so we went back in, and we woke the kids up and put their life jackets on, put them in the boat, rowed out into the middle of the lake to see it, and it was dark. They were totally unimpressed because it had already eclipsed and it was just dark and we had woken them up for nothing. Yeah, it's hard to be a good parent.
How about, John?
John Dick. I think this is turned on. I don't hear very well.
Yeah, just get right on it.
Okay. You were talking about nighttime events,
Yeah.
and I've been coming not quite as long as you, but since 1941 to Lake Dunmore. And I was 4 years old at the time Japan surrendered, and I remember some guy out in the middle of the lake at night shooting his gun off in the air.
Really? That was probably Doc Phillips.
It was not. He did a lot of things. That was not he.
Much later, do we remember when there was actually a garage on Route 7 that was, it's where the gorilla is now, but what was the name, who owned that?
Julie?
Um,
I want to know how
Yep.
the gorilla got there.
History of the gorilla, anybody know
I know
that?
it's not Salisbury.
Joan O'Neill.
Who?
Joan O'Neill owned that, Pioneer Auto.
Pioneer Auto.
Why did he put it?
Why a gorilla, she's saying.
She got sold by a guy who came around with cement figures. The chipmunk at the
Camperville?
Camperville was the same person who did that, and he did some other figures, but she got the gorilla and got the Volkswagen on top. Joan was a wonderful character. She was a used car salesman in days when women weren't selling used cars. She did it, and she built her own little business and took great pride in it, and took great pride in that gorilla. So it's an accomplishment as a landmark to attract people to her used car business.
Now, Peter, she must have come after, I got the name now, Brown's. It was somebody Brown who had that car dealership there.
That was Harry Brown. Yeah, but that was, that never really, he was a dealer in Middlebury, and I've forgotten.
Never really took off?
Well, he was around a long time, going back in the car business before I started practicing law. But Joan, I got to know fairly early on, and know her parents and her family. And
What I remember about it when Brown's owned it, though, was that that's where the gypsies stayed.
Yep.
And you had to drive by to see the caravan, the gypsy caravan, that was camped out on his property.
when I was state's attorney, it was when the gypsies were there, and I made a visit to them, not knowing much about what there, but hearing warnings, and just simply said, we don't want any problems, if you have any questions, and there were no problems, and things worked out, but I remember them parking in that same area. There also used to be a big sign there before that, the Lake Dunmore Hotel, a great big billboard pointing to the road to the right, take you up around the lake to the hotel. And when we used to come up, that was the sign, we were really here. You know.
Oh, yeah, the gateway to Lake Dunmore.
Yeah.
Did anybody else go do a drive-by of the gypsy caravan? Because I remember it was wagons.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was the traditional wagons, horses, the whole deal. Yeah.
That'd be 61 to somewhere.
Somewhere in there.
I remember.
Yeah.
Just an aside, Joan O'Neill, who did this, had a wedding. Her daughter got married, and she was going to have a special, and she had it at the Radisson in Burlington. And she invited every used car dealer from New England to come. And she insisted upon protocol. All the waiters had to be wearing white gloves, and she was going to put on a real show, and she did. It was a little bit of the tacky side, but real show. Real show. And that was her way of just announcing to the world that she had arrived as one of the top used car salesmen in Vermont.
Also, more recent, but certainly memorable, was the houseboat that appeared on the lake, off the east shore, kind of out in front of Granbury, that lasted maybe one summer. Two? Couple? At least 2 summers? They burnt the first one.
They burned the first one down.
They did or somebody did?
People were very offended by the houseboat.
Wonder who they were.
So the houseboat was built by a group of friends,
Yeah.
my age, a little bit older. I was part of the houseboat.
Oh. Aha.
Some of, I don't know if it was the association, I'm not sure exactly, some of the camp owners, but they were afraid that we were polluting the lake. What they didn't know was that we had a compost toilet on the houseboat, and we weren't polluting anything. But we were a bunch of high school kids that were just out having fun. There was nothing, there was no alcohol involved. We were just having a space to call our own, and we did water skiing off the houseboat, we swam off the houseboat, we just hung out at the houseboat, but it wasn't accepted well, and so they burned it down. So Roger, who we know as Dizzy was annoyed. He had built the first one, and he said, they're not going to keep me from doing this, and he built a second one. And the second one actually stayed on the lake through the winter because he was afraid if he took it off in the winter, he wouldn't be able to get it back on. And that one lasted 2 years. So it was a span of about 3 years' time that the houseboat was on, and some wonderful memories. But
And what did your father have to say about that?
pardon me?
And what did your father have to say about
He
that?
didn't tell me I was late for my curfew.
Also more recent, does anybody remember here the year of the freshwater jellyfish in Lake Dunmore? The lake was pretty much taken over by all these little jellyfish, and people were scared to swim. People don't remember that? Okay, well, I do. Do you guys do? No? And so over here? Okay, here. Somebody remembers the jellyfish.
We have friends that have pictures of it.
Yeah, and they were all over the place. These little, like, 1 or 2 inch freshwater jellyfish. And people were scared to swim in the water, but we still did. Yeah, that was I looked that up. I thought it was somewhere around 68, maybe. Somewhere in that time period. Yeah. Okay. Other topics that we have not touched. Oh, okay.
Yeah, I have a question. The way the stories go, I live on Morgan Road, and as far as I know, I lived with my wonderful wife here in the first mobile home in Vermont, if not the U.S. The story goes that the house that we live in was built about 1/10 of a mile down the road on the wrong property. So there was a team of oxen who hauled the house on logs rolling down and to where the house is now. I was just wondering if anybody knows anything about that. The previous owners of the house, what was their name?
Well, it was Rich Paterni and his family, or family members.
Right.
but I don't remember.
Anyway, I was wondering how true this story is, as to whether I actually owned the first mobile home.
The house is down on a hollow, and the hills on both sides are quite steep. So rolling that house, which was built in 1869, rolling that house down the hill would have been quite a feat with oxen. And we were just curious.
And you said the neighbors back in the day were attorneys?
Yeah, there were Bertoni's, and it's a Whitney house. I mean, it's a house that belonged in the Whitney family. And actually, we had a grandmother come and visit us, or she a great-grandmother, with her granddaughter or great-granddaughter. Jake gave her an old nail we had found out by the barn, and she was just delighted. She was in her 90s, living in what is now the residence. And we just don't know much about it. Marion Sullivan found 2 pictures of the house, which we have, which were up for the 250 celebration. And we took them and framed them and all that, and it shows a barn that's not there, and lots of other things. But we just wondered if this story about the house being rolled down into the hollow is true.
There's certainly still attorneys around. Reggie lives over on our street. You can contact him, give him a call. I don't know. All right, I will. Let's see, check my list. Other topics out there? Oh, there's one.
So this is just for a simpler time. So I married into a family that's a little cottage that's right across the channel from Keewaydin, right where the buoy is.
Yeah.
And so there's 5 generations of kids down, my great grandkids in that cottage. So the simpler times, I think it's Sleepy Oaks, but it used to be the candy store, which ended up being the cream stand that was Wisnowski's for a while. Anyway, the Jameses and the Quackenbushes in this little cottage put 10 kids in there. We had no idea where the kids slept. And we were certainly drinking a lot of wine and ran out and sent the 12-year-old up to the candy store to get some more wine. And this being Vermont, they gave it to him. You know, saying, "Don't do that again." And the other memory is, I don't know if you know that right across the channel is there's a dock from Keewaydin where the young kids came out. And back, way before this was not PC any longer, the little guys used to come out there stark naked, and the counselors would have towels on, and they'd go and jump in the water. And there were a lot of little girls on the dock where we were with binoculars.
When Kathy was talking, it just reminded me that when those lightning races were going on, you used to know the spinnakers of each of those boats, and you used to know whose boat it was, and you probably knew who was captaining the boat as well. And then there were the sailfishes and sunfishes, and I'm not so sure we recognized all those, but it reminded me of the whole boat situation, because we used to be able to recognize the power boats and whose boat and what engine it had, and which one was Howard Brush's Century?
Higgins.
What was it?
Higgins.
Higgins. Howard Brush's Higgins, and of course we had kind of, my dad got kind of an unusual boat, which was a jet boat, and it moved by pushing water out the back. And so you used to get lined up with somebody on the dock, and then you used to floor it, and you spray them with a fire hose, essentially, as they were standing on. We were nice kids. But what was kind of cool about that was that you could actually spin the whole boat. It didn't have anything under the water, and you could just zip along and then do a 180-degree turn and go the other way. But I remember recognizing, oh, this was John Joy's boat, and this was...
Tarky's Chris Craft.
Oh, yeah.
Donzie.
The Donzies.
Donzie.
The Donzies showed up in the north end.
Yellow.
Yeah, yeah. Canals, both.
Harry Goodrow's boat.
Harry Goodrow's Century.
Before that, he had a Higgins.
Before that, he had Higgins. Okay. But that was all kind of fun stuff. You recognized the boats, and you knew where they came from on the lake, and you knew those people. Is there more tonight before we close up? Yep, there is somewhere. Yep.
After the Lake Dunmore house burned down, the remaining cottages became Higgins Tavern.
Okay.
I have a picture up here, and it shows my bedroom window, 1952. Later, my father bought the Higgins Tavern and turned it into Camp Dunmore.
Okay.
One of our campers became an illustrator later on and went to Hollywood. He illustrates the show Family Guy,
Oh, cool.
which I've never seen. And in the show, the son has to go to camp. The only camp that this illustrator remembered was Camp Dunmore. So I have a picture of the cartoon showing the exact picture of Camp Dunmore in my bedroom window from 1952.
You might, if you can either pass it around, or we got some pictures up here, or you could put that too. So anything else that, Donnie, are you going to say something? Go ahead.
Just to be a curmudgeon, I did remember, because I drove around the lake the other day and saw all the power boats and god-awful pontoon boats. But when I was a kid, I actually counted the number of inboard boats on the lake, and there were 6. And I can name the families that owned them.
Go ahead. There's a Howard Brush.
Howard Brush, the Goodrows, I'll probably screw this up, the Goodrows, the Giros,
Oh, yeah.
The McFaddens,
Okay.
the Wrights, and Simons. And I think that's 6.
That was it. 6 inboards.
That's it.
My daughter.
Mahogany power boats, they were all inboard. There were no other inboard boats on the lake.
What year are we talking?
Probably 1954, 53 or 54.
Tarkies had
Tarkies?
the Chris Craft at that time.
I don't remember when the Tarkies had a Chris Craft, but I won't say they didn't. But
Peter was probably in that boat.
But there weren't very.
I'll tell the reason I remember.
There weren't very many, I can tell you that.
Yeah.
And we knew them all as kids.
I remember Tarky's boat because we used to crawl up to his lodge and look in the boathouse windows. And he had 2 beautiful inboard boats up there. One was sort of a lap straight white one, and the other was, I think it was a Chris. But yeah.
Well, we never saw them on the lake, did we?
No, I never saw
Just
them.
stored away. Yeah. So it would have been earlier that they were actually out and about with you in it, doing something.
Remember the notion of the green bombs,
Okay. Well,
which used to be your dad's camp, by the way.
thanks to everyone for coming and sharing memories. This has been taped.